You know, in the start of this year, I thought to myself, I really want to take Vauban out for a spin. By the way, I know the correct pronunciation for his name is Vauban, but I'm just so used to calling him Vauban that I know I'm going to slip up, so I'll just stick with that. Then, DE announced they are doing a Vauban rework after I pretty much prepared everything for his video. And holy mother of tenor, he did not get a little retouch. No. This is like Nova all over again. He is a hell of a lot stronger now. But I will admit, there are still a few drawbacks which I will get into. Nonetheless, you're going to love Vauban if you didn't before because he has definitely received some big buffs, and let's not waste any time, let's get straight into it. Vauban's passive is still the same as before with the extra damage. The only thing that has changed is just the description to better understand how the multiplicative damage bonus works. You will deal 1.25 times damage to incapacitated enemies. Enemies that are affected by electricity from Tesla Nervos, which is his first, will also receive a damage buff via his passive, which is a multiplicative bonus. Very nice. They did say in the patch notes that they wanted this bonus to apply to all electricity effects, but they ran out of time, so hopefully they will add this in future. This passive will proc with Tesla Nervos being attached to an enemy, Minelayer's tether coil, and Bastille's prison. This is a pretty decent amount of damage increase since it's multiplicative and bounces off of different bonuses, so it doesn't seem like much, but it actually does increase your damage. Vauban's first is called Tesla Nervos. I love this ability, and out of everything that they changed for his retouch, this is the one thing that I'm most excited for. Throw out a ball that will latch onto a nearby enemy, dealing electricity damage per second within a 6-meter radius. Each Tesla Nervos will hold 10 electrical charges that last until it's fully used. You can also hold down this ability to throw up to 4 balls at one time. That is the maximum amount. With the retouch or light rework, Tesla Nervos will now scale its status chance with ability strength, which is huge. It will have better AI improvements, allowing the balls to target enemies outside of the range of the Nervos that is currently attached to an enemy, so that it spreads their impact to more enemies at once as opposed to just being all huddled up on one enemy. This goes hand in hand with his new passive, to be fair. It does have improved targeting logic to avoid invalid objects, for example flying enemies, because before it was very janky, but now it's a lot better. They can now target enemies that are affected by your fourth ability Bastille when they're ragdolled. This is also quite huge. And the Nervos now attached to enemies on first contact. These balls will shock enemies immediately as they latch onto a target. There is also a VFX trail, so you can track these balls a little bit better, because that was my personal gripe with this ability. It was so hard to see where these things were. However, there is a problem, which is the one thing that I really hope that they added, or they were going to add, and I hope that they do consider this in the future. The biggest issue for me is the fact that they don't teleport to you after you go a certain range away from them. So you have to recast this entire ability if you move, let's say, to the next room. It kind of sucks. I wish that they would teleport to you after, let's say, you move, I don't know, 80 meters or 100 meters. I'm just throwing a number out there, but you get what I'm saying. The whole point is, if they attach onto an enemy that is in one room and you run 400 meters the other way, they do not teleport to you, which sucks. I wish they added that. Tesla Bank is the augment for this ability, an extremely satisfying augment, but it's a very confusing one. It also has received a minor change. What this augment does is, while the target has a Nervos attached to them, and the damage that is dealt to it will be absorbed by the Nervos and channeled into an 8-meter burst of electricity damage on death. The burst radius is affected by range, and the damage that is dealt to it is based on the percentage of the target's total unarmored health, including shields. The new thing that has changed is there is a mark above the enemy that is affected, which is determined by your energy color. This makes a big difference, because before, again, same thing, you had no idea where they were. This does help you drastically if you use this augment. I always use this augment because I love it. Now you can just purely focus on the marked targets and deal big AoE damage. Vauban's second ability is called Minelayer. This has also changed for the better and has received a huge quality of life buff. Before, you had 4 mines that you had to cycle. Now there's only 2. They have joined Tether and Flechette Orb and Vector and Overdrive Pad. They've just merged them together with the same mechanics for Flechette and Tether. Tether will now pull enemies towards it and search for new targets if their current target enters a Bastille or they die. Flechette Orb will also target the enemies that are pulled and also nearby enemies too. This does create a cool chain that you can pretty much just drag enemies all the way into Bastille, which we'll go over Bastille in a moment. This new dual mine can now stick to walls and ceilings, and Tether mechanics have improved so enemies have less chance of getting stuck. The Vector Overdrive Pad is now joined. This one's a hit or miss for me, and let me explain. It is amazing, don't get me wrong. But when you step on a vector pad, it now gives you the overdrive buff to Vauban and his allies, and it gives you that speed boost. This does remove the previous 4 overdrive cap that Vauban used to have. The speed boost is a 1.25 times bonus that is affected by ability strength, and the speed and damage buff also applies to companions as you go over it, but it can launch you to the moon and also launch your companion off to the moon too if you have a free moving or beast companion as opposed to a sentinel. It can also make it glitch out a little, which is a bit irritating, but don't worry, like I said, if you walk over it, it also applies to your companions too. Enemies who step on the pad are lightly staggered after they are boosted off. Minelayer now works off of a tap and hold mechanic. You can invert this in the settings to choose which one you prefer most. I did invert mine. Now let's very quickly talk about what each mine does. Tether Coil will throw out an energy wire, inflicting slash and ragdolling enemies, pulling up to 2 enemies within line of sight for 20 meters. It goes hand in hand with Flechette Orb, and it does tie into Vauban's passive with enemies being incapacitated. Now Flechette is the juicy one. This is the one that we all love. And why is that? Because of the infinite damage scaling potential from this mine. In a nutshell, when this mine is down, it will send out high velocity nails that deal puncture scaling damage with a 50% crit chance, 2 times critical multiplier, and a 5% status chance with forced puncture on enemies hit. Enemies within 10 meters are prioritized. Now the nail damage scales as follows: ability strength, enemy level, Vauban's passive, and the overdrive damage bonus. Fun fact, when the ability crits, it doubles the damage because of the 2 times critical multiplier. Yeah, that's just the summary of this ability. It's like I said, an infinite scaling ability that can nuke enemies at any level, provided you get enemies to stay within the range. Look, he could do this before, make no mistake, but with the changes and everything, he can just do it a lot more smoothly. That makes sense. Oh, and by the way, the crit stats are not affected by weapon mods, but they are affected by these things right here. I'm just going to pop a screenshot for you to see. I think Flechette Orb speaks for itself. Vector Pad is very simple. You gain your overdrive bonus when you stand over it because it's 1 mine, and you gain a 1.25 times speed boost that is affected by ability strength. Overdriver grants 25% base multiplicative damage that also applies to Vauban's passive and is scaled with ability strength, and it affects allies and companions easier now. Yeah, let's see why I say why the 25% bonus from your passive is not as little or not as bad as you may think. Yeah, Vauban does big damage. Moving on to his third ability. I must admit, I do love it. It is so satisfying to send down an artillery strike. I do like it, but I do get tired of being flashbanged the whole time. The only way to combat this is to literally do a quick 180 when throwing it, which is kind of funny. I have to admit, it's funny that you have to do it, but it just gets a bit much when you're hardcore spamming and your eyes are just, yeah. DE likes to blind you. It's quite funny. This is a personal preference, but it's why it's my subsume slot for Vauban. However, there have been some changes for Photon Strike. You will deal blast damage. With the new changes, it now applies a forced blast proc, and Photon Strike deals double damage to overguarded enemies. It now costs 50 energy per cast. Blast radius is now 7 meters, as previously it was 5. Enemies trapped in Bastille no longer get thrown about by Photon Strike, which is great because, yeah, it's just great. And DE has also reduced the VFX for squad mates, but not yourself. Photon Repeater, the augment for this ability. If Photon Strike hits at least 5 enemies, the next cast will cost no energy and fire 2 additional strikes. I must say, this thing does a lot of damage, especially now after these changes. It is a lot better, and you can scale this thing like crazy. Photon Strike is very good. Then we have Bastille. Oh, this frame's got such confusing abilities, or just a lot to talk about. Okay, Bastille is the core of Vauban's kit. You send out a device that upon contact will create a field that suspends enemies within a 10-meter radius at base, scaling with ability range. Previously, this had an enemy cap. That's no longer the case. You have an unlimited amount of enemies that can be affected by this, but they have reduced the amount of Bastilles that you can have active at one time to 4. The Bastille itself, which suspends enemies, and the vortex side of it. You can have 4 Bastilles and 4 vortexes. The vortex can be procced when the duration runs out of Bastille, or you tap the ability again to detonate it earlier. Also, if you then tap or hold, depending on which way you inverted, you can throw down a vortex off rip, or you can throw down a Bastille. So you need to learn how to manage this. The vortex will pull enemies in and ragdoll them to the device, creating a vacuum effect. It will also pull in loot, which is quite nice. Why the Vortex is so amazing is because it allows you to localize enemies and put them all together, create a blender of death if you put on Flechette Orb onto it and Tether Mine, and then you have your weapon damage and you have Tesla Bank as well. It's just, his whole kit works around Bastille. However, that is not all. Bastille will armor strip enemies as per normal, like it did before. It will steal the armor if you are in range and give it to you and your allies as a buff. It now will steal and grant you and your allies 1,500 armor. If you leave the area, you will maintain the armor bonus as a buff for a certain duration, depending on your ability duration, of course. But guess what? Oh, this is so amazing. Okay, the Bastille side will now affect enemies being ragdolled by Vortex. Previously, it did not. So this means Vauban can quite easily give you and your allies 1,500 armor all the time. Primary Bulwark is smiling right now. Not only that, the armor you and your allies receive is doubled if an enemy is actively stripped, so it's even faster than before. Like I said, quality of life change for this is huge. The Vortex version also applies magnetic, which now scales with power strength for its status chance. Sound effects and VFX have also been changed too. What is crazy about this as well is if you throw down a Vortex first, the first Vortex that you cast, any following vortexes that you throw will then be pulled into the first Vortex cast, which is pretty, like, it's very nice. It's a nice quality of life thing. I actually cannot remember if that was done prior to the rework. The augment for Bastille has now been renamed to Enduring Bastille. The repelling mechanic has now been removed entirely, as Bastille no longer has an enemy cap. Killing an enemy in Bastille now increases its duration by 2 seconds. The time increase scales with duration, and the total bonus duration is capped at 2 times. Vortex's duration is also increased by 70% of its maximum duration for each additional vortex thrown into it. This is a fantastic augment if you want to literally just loot enemies, or you want to use a group and you want to keep Bastille up at all times. And that was a lot to go over, I know, but that's how in-depth this Warframe is. If I could ask that you smash that like button, it would go a long way for me. It really means a lot. And if you're enjoying the content, consider subscribing. Thank you so much. Now, how you play Vauban is pretty simple. Generally speaking, Vauban is a stationary warframe, but not always. This is because of Bastille pulling enemies in with Vortex. It's great to pair with other warframes that either loot or benefit from clumped up enemies. For example, let's say you want to do a looting run for a certain amount of resources. You can put a NEKROS, a Korra, and of Nova, for example, and then you have you that pulls enemies in, Nova speeds them up, and then Korra just kills them. Tesla Nervos is super fun to use, especially if you have the augment. It can be doubled up to proc your passive, increasing your damage and stunning enemies. Minelayer is used at your own discretion. I do recommend Vector Overdrive so you can get the multiplicative buff. Photon Strike is just for explosions and damage and blinding you. That's it. Pairing this with Bastille and Vortex is just huge to localize enemies. It's just, yeah, if I could say something though, I'd recommend that you keep one Bastille and one Vortex up at all times. This is so that you can armor strip enemies, get that 1,500 armor for you and your allies, and you're crowd controlling enemies. It's just great. This allows you to spam Photon Strike, Flechette Orb, Tether Mine to affect the most amount of enemies. This is why I say that Vauban's core is Bastille, because it synergizes so well with all of his other abilities. Now, what are the problems very quickly that I wanted to speak about? Well, there's only a couple of things. Firstly, it's the Tesla Nervos and the Tesla Bank story, where I hoped that they would consider, and I really do hope that they consider allowing the Tesla Nervos or the little balls to TP to you when you move too far away. I genuinely hope that they hear that and add that in later on. The next thing is with the vector pad. You see, the problem with it is you get launched into the sky if you have high ability strength, or just in general. One way to fix this is to quickly jump as you get affected by the vector pad. Alternatively, you can jump backwards to kind of backflip over it, but I find that it still feels weird. You have to go directly over it. You can't bullet jump or roll over it. You have to walk over the pad in order to get affected by it. It's just weird. I can't describe it to you, but those two things are a bit weird and the problems with Vauban's kit. I do think it's something to take note that if you're playing with a group, it's a good idea to cast vector pad into a wall so that they don't just get confused if they're suddenly moving and get launched off into the other side of the room. Now let's go over the builds for Vauban. The first one, starting off with the budget one, you could use this one right here. Any augments you see fit. I mean, Tesla Bank is very nice for pure damage and just nuking enemies. Enduring Bastille is also incredibly powerful as well if you want to use that just for keeping Bastille up. Photon repeater is another option too. This covers everything. You can put on adaptation if you want to, anything like that. This works for base one. My stats are vastly different here because I do have Archon shards, so that is why your stats are going to be different. Pretty simple, don't need to overthink it. When we move on to the steel pass side of things, this is where it gets a little bit much because there are so many ways to go about building Vauban and actually how to scale his kit. You can go ridiculous range or super high range with overextended, or you can drop overextended and go 175% range with auger reach and stretch. I do use Archon stretch to get that extra energy regen because of course we have Tesla Nervos. It fits perfectly. Another option is dropping primed flow and running arcane battery instead. This is a good option. I do this on some of my helmet builds. This is what you can do too. The next thing is if you want to scale, for example, just Flechette Orb as the main thing to focus on, you could use Arcane Crepuscular, you could use Avenger, Hotshot, Arcane Arachne, which I have over here. This can be changed there. Personally, I actually recommend you go Arcane Circumvent because even though you get 1500 armor from Bastille and you have enemies being pulled in and all that stuff and everything getting stunned, I find that Vauban can still die quite easily. And I think that's just because of overguarded enemies. He still struggles from that, and adaptation is just not fully enough, especially if you start scaling with him. So that's why I'd recommend Circumvent. He is completely flexible. You are more than welcome to try out different ways to build him, but this one works quite well here for me. If you don't like the minus or very low efficiency, drop Blind Rage and go something else, and drop Overextended as well so that you don't have to worry too much. For the Archon shards, I do have one casting speed because I find that's more than enough for him. You can do two. Then the rest, I would just say duration or strength. It's really up to you, or you can go equilibrium, or you could even go maybe armor because then you could scale certain arcanes or anything like that you want. Finally, we move on to the helmet setups. First one is a bright bonnet setup. This is more of a stationary version, something to scale your strength for you and your allies to maintain your energy easier. This is a great option if you're going to be using for team compositions or anything like that and you would like to use Vauban's kit. It also increases the damage of your vector overdrive pad and things like that as well. Very, very powerful. Just works quite well. Same thing which I said with the no helmet setup, you can drop and change and do whatever you want. It's up to you. Next one is a more mobile Vauban, if I'd like to call it that. This is something that I've personally taken into Void Cascade prior to the rework, and I can tell you now it's going to work perfectly even after the rework. This is fantastic to just keep him alive, and also you still benefit from Bastille, armor stripping, extra armor, all these things here. It's a great setup. Raw, which can be subsumed on either his 1 or his 3 depending which one you want to scale, will affect Minelayer with Flechette Orb. It'll affect Photon Strike. You'll do millions of damage with Photon Strike with the setup, or you'll do a lot of damage with Tesla Bank if you subsume Raw over your 3. This is what the setup looks like. Lastly, Eclipse. Not that great. I thought it'd be better, but you can switch this to any helmet or subsume you'd like. This is the option here. Again, more than welcome to change it. It's not set in stone. And that wraps up this very long Vauban video because damn, he is a fantastic Warframe. And the one thing that I'm very, very excited to try out is how his subsume, which is Tesla Nervos and Tesla Bank, works on other Warframes, especially after this little rework and change. I'm hoping it's going to be very good, and you probably will see a video if it is. Overall, I can say for sure that Vauban is in a much better place, and I definitely highly recommend that you give him a try if you have not, because damn, he is good. He is fun. He's different, but he's fun. This video has gone on for very long. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, a massive thank you to our channel members. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you for your support. I will see you guys in the next video.